Thursday, and it is great to have you all joining us for a webinar to talk about self-employment. And so today, again, my name is Ashley Lance. I'm a senior consultant with Griffin-Hammis Associates. I'm joining you from Iowa, which is below Minnesota, above Missouri, for anybody who needs any help with figuring out where Iowa is. And it is kind of a dreary day here. It's not too hot, so hopefully it's warm and sunny where all of you are. And so today we're just going to dive into a couple of case studies and looking at some practical considerations for launching a business. And so we'll look at two different individuals that I've had the opportunity to work with. One is in the very midst of launching her business. And so hopefully by walking through each of these case studies, we can look at what are some pieces that came up, what were the directions that particularly pointed these folks in the directions that they chose to go in. So I will try and stop for questions after each of the case studies and we'll go from there. But it's a pretty small group, so hopefully we can have a great conversation today, and then we'll get you on your way after 3 o'clock. So we'll just have a brief introduction, and then we're just going to dive right into those case studies. So I'm going to be telling you a little bit about Louisa and M, and then we'll just kind of do an overview of the takeaways. So I think, how do we get there, right? So we all know that it first starts with DPG, or discovering personal genius. We don't just wake up one morning and say, oh, I think I'd like to open up a business. For most folks anyway, right? There are some folks that, maybe always had the desire of being self-employed. However, the process of DPG really pushes us to look at what is it that this person contributes, right? What is their personal genius? But also at the same time, through the process, it allows us to identify, what does the community need? What can the community benefit from? When we were just this past couple of days, we've talked about the concept of creating and not cloning. And I think this certainly applies in regards to self-employment, because when we hear success stories, we think, oh, how can this person create a coffee shop in their community because it worked for this person? However, we have to remember that cloning is not the answer, right? It's really looking at the principles and the concepts that that person used to identify, how did they get to the outcome? How did they identify that owning a coffee shop was going to be a good fit for this person? Instead of saying, oh, all people with disabilities should open up a coffee shop if they're chatty and they like people. That doesn't take into consideration, what can the community benefit from, right? If I'm going to sell something, if I'm going to have a self-employment venture, it's got to have a need, right? It's got to align with my abilities and skills, but at the same time, it also needs to fit a need or benefit for my community. And so from there, then we dive into research and development, we're exploring funding, and then we finally get to testing out the concept, right? It's certainly more in depth, and you all know that, beyond 4 steps, right? But those are kind of 4 general areas. So let's just dive in and talk about my buddy Louisa. Louisa lives in Utah, and I've had the opportunity to work with her for about the past year, as well as her fantastic employment specialist, Megan. And Louisa has a passion for equine. She particularly is skilled in working with small ponies. And so we're going to talk a little bit about where her discovery path is taking her. So when I met her, it was through a school to work project that we're doing in Utah. And so that means that we're working with the school, as well as the provider, as well as workforce and voc rehab and their waiver services. And so we're coming around students before they graduate. So it's in that 18 to 21 kind of program. And so when I met Louisa, her high school work experiences have included food delivery. And these are all prearranged activities that were part of this, not the school to work project, but her transition program through school. And so she had helped with food delivery. So, connecting with people through that. and arranging and delivering flowers, and as well as some work experience around food service. So, but that was about it. Not much in working with animals at this point, but in those predetermined things through school. And then based on what they had selected, they really worked to identify what would benefit students based on what they knew about them. And then when she wasn't at school, she was also participating in a dehabilitation program. And so that's something she's still participating in, but is very anxiously ready to be done with going to Dayhab. So we had her home visit, and this is actually a picture of Louisa. She is a natural party planner. So when I first had the opportunity to meet her at her home visit, she had like essentially place settings for all of us in her living room. And each of us had a glass of water the minute, like before we had even walked in, right? So she was planning for us. She knew how many of us were attending. She was just gracious. I think she had made cookies. And so, she had really thought about, okay, I'm inviting people to my home and I want them to feel welcome, right? So that's just kind of like an instinctive skill, I think, of party planners, of hosters. So it just comes natural to her. And then the photo here is of myself and Trisha Jones-Parkin from Utah DSPD Services, which is their waiver, Louisa, and her employment consultant, Megan. And so this was a meeting where we were just touching base the last time I was out there, and she had made fresh cupcakes for us. And so each time, I mean, she's just constantly thinking about whenever she's hosting, there's always food on the table. So, and it's good food as well. So she's a natural host. She's a natural party planner. She also, during the home visit, she really talked about this passion for horses. She really wanted to work with horses. She talked about that, she had pictures of horses. Not a lot, though. I mean, she had a few pictures, but it wasn't like plastered pictures of horses all over her room or anything. But she certainly talked about her interest, and her employment consultant also is very interested in horses. So they really hit it off over a mutual interest. And she also shared that she loves going to the local theme park. So she's also a bit of a thrill seeker, because she was telling us about all of the roller coasters she enjoys being on. She's highly involved in her church community. And how she's involved, though, is in hosting. So they have a couple of different community groups through their church where they're hosting events for church members, or they're putting on different activities. And so Louisa is part of all of those activities and helping host and facilitate those, which certainly aligns with just her natural ability to be a great host. And then also, she loves makeup and My Little Pony. So every time we see Louisa, she's always sparkling and glittering, and in a very respectable way, right? I mean, she doesn't go wild with her makeup, but she certainly has an interest and a passion in looking nice. She's very into pinks and sparkles. And so her home visit really shines through of who she is and the things that are really important to her. So after her home visit, we started thinking about, and then her staff also interviewed some other folks as well. And so as we move into discovery activities, some things that were explored were she hosted a Star Wars party for her transition program. So it was at the time of the last release of the Star Wars program, Star Wars movie. I'm not a Star Wars geek, so hopefully that doesn't turn any of you off. I'm sorry if it does. But when the video was being released, she threw a party. She also hosted a girls' night with a party planner, and so that's what the photo is on the right. Is this woman that there was a mutual connection through the School to Work project as well as through the employment specialist. And so it came out through a team building activity that she hosts a party every single weekend. So she is just a natural host. And so Louisa connected with her and they planned a girls' night. And so Louisa, they had met prior, they identified the theme, what activities were they going to have at the party, what food and beverage was going to be served. And so that really also helped highlight, okay, her planning abilities, right? And so she's taking time to identify, she obviously wanted a pink theme, so she had cut out the napkins in a certain shape. She had her hair done. I think they did nails at the party. And so it was a really fun girls' night. And so, but Louisa helped plan the evening with the party planner. And so that was how we got there, is because we're connecting that with what we've learned in the home visit, right? That she's a natural host, she's a natural party planner. And but she hadn't necessarily hosted a party that was outside of her comfort zone, right? So she doesn't know anybody necessarily at the party. She was more of the party planner role as opposed to hosting it at her home. And so she also spent time grooming horses at the local stable. So through her home visit, we know that she loves the planning and the party piece, and then also the interest of horses, and the equine piece comes through. And so she spent some time grooming horses at a local stable, and she was right up there with the horses. I mean, horses are big animals, right? And so she was right in there grooming. She was touching their noses. She was just very careful and thoughtful in her touch with the horses. And at the same time, her employment specialist also is an expert in horses, right? And so they were able to use her social capital in connecting with a lot of experts around horses. And then another one of her discovery activities, so on the party planning theme, right, or event planning, there's this princess party company. And so they also went and talked to this princess party company that they dress up like Disney princesses and then host parties for children. And so that also was part of kind of identifying the need, and we'll get there in a few minutes. So the informational interviews that really started driving the process to Louisa's self-employment venture is they had also done an informational interview with a petting zoo. And they had previously had a pony business that was very successful, and they used to rent out the ponies and lease the ponies. But you can see here, it looks like she's petting a goat. So they kind of have like this local, like sort of petting zoo. And so they had originally went and started talking to them just as an informational interview. He had shared that they had this successful pony business in the past, and that there really wasn't anybody else who does the pony business in the Salt Lake area. And then at the princess party piece, so when they were doing the informational interview with the princess party, the photo is just a stock photo of princess parties, but it's along that same line, right? So they dress up as Disney princesses and they do local parties. And so when they were talking to the owner, she had talked about this consideration of really wanting to be able to offer a unicorn that was part of the party process. And so what more could a small child want, right, than an adorable pony with a unicorn as their party, as part of the party, right? And so she was just in general talking about this. And at the same time, Louisa is showing these beautiful skills around working with horses and particularly ponies. And so some juices start flowing around. Okay, well, what if she could have her own business, but almost a business within a business where she partners with the princess party business? So the need started just through that informational interview process, right, around the princess party piece and the petting zoo piece. And so them sharing, oh, well, it was really successful, but, we were the only ones really doing it in Utah. So there's some room for a competition, right? And so from there, so we're starting to collect some information, identifying a community need through the informational interview process, right? So we're not quite sure exactly where it's going at this point, but we're just collecting information and identifying that, okay, there is the need, and it's starting to align with Louisa's skills and abilities. So through the school to work process, one of those pieces is exploring paid internships while folks are in school. And so she's just finishing up school. Her paid internship was through, it's kind of like a business that takes you back in time, right? So it's set up kind of as an old farm in like early 1900s, and you can tour around the farms. It's particularly like great for like school age children and learning about history. And so at this farm, they have a small pony area, and they also have chickens and various animals that you can go and pet. And then, so her internship is all about working with the ponies at this business. And so at the same time, she's building her skills around working with horses, and she's caring for the horses. And then at the same time, she's building her skills around working with children. And so her particular role, I think I have a picture of it here. Her particular role is in this carousel. And so they hook up the horses kind of in the carousel, and then they take children on, 2 or 3 minute rides around this pony carousel. And so Louisa helps get the children on the horses, and then they walk. Each horse has an attendant that walks with them and the child. And so she's really starting to develop and perfecting her skills around working with children and getting more comfortable in working with children, as well as continually working with the ponies, which she is most passionate about. So if you see her in her element, she is just all over these horses. I mean, just loving them all day long, and you can just tell that they're comfortable with her because they're like nuzzling into her, and she has a particular love for one of the ponies in the picture to the left. That's one of the lighter ones. So she's just really in her element, and we can tell by her nonverbals. She's smiling. She doesn't want to leave. She's just absolutely joyous on the days that she gets to go to her internship. And so this is also a seasonal business, right? So when it snows, it's not in operation. So, but this is also an opportunity there is an opportunity, I believe, for her to turn this into employment that might supplement her self-employment venture. So here we go. So we're kind of connecting the pieces, right? So when we go back to the princess party piece, right? So at the same time that Louisa's internship is going on, her employment consultant is meeting with the princess party business, because we said, okay, so you had mentioned that it would be ideal, if you had a unicorn. And would you be interested? Would it be a benefit if Louisa had a pony that you could partner with Louisa in her business, and she would operate a pony business that would be in conjunction with the princess party business? So the princess party owner is not necessarily really interested in owning the pony herself. However, she is very interested in contracting specifically with a company that would allow her to offer ponies at the parties. And so there's a lot of P words in there, right? So these conversations are taking place with Louisa, Megan, and the princess party folks. And it comes through that she would just want to exclusively partner with her. And so in the exploration phase, we're looking at, okay, well, how often? So she shares, well, on average, she has at least, I think, 15 parties a month. And so thinking that at least 10 to 12 of those parties per month, they would want to have the option of bringing in the pony. And so they also were talking about how they could create a character around Louisa, so to fit into the princess party theme. So that would include, getting dressed up, wearing makeup, and then eventually developing a costume for Princess Louisa and her pony. So as we're exploring this, we suggested the idea of, well, let's try it out. So the Princess Party Company sets up a customer appreciation party. And so the customer appreciation party was the opportunity for Louisa to lease a pony and try the business out, right? So before all the investment happens, we're looking at, let's just try it out. Let's see how it goes for the first test run, right? We're piloting the idea. So this is a picture of Louisa at the party. So as you can see, she leased the pony. So at this point, she hasn't purchased a pony yet because we're not there yet. However, they have the connections through the informational interviews to lease the pony, and we were able to use project funds. So that's also the nice piece is in Utah, due to this grant that we're working on, we had some project funds that we could use to help Louisa purchase the things that would be needed to test out the business concept. And so she rents the pony. You can also see that the pony's got a little unicorn decal piece ornament that the pony is wearing. And then for confidentiality for this child, I blanked out her face. So and here's Louisa. And so she got dressed up for the day. She got her hair done. She has makeup on. You can't really tell that in the picture, but she is taking each of the gals at the party on pony rides. And so this went really, really well. There was a lot of interest. So at the same time, the business owner of the princess party is assessing what's the interest from my customers on including a pony in their parties, right? And then for the same time, Louisa's testing out this concept of as well, saying, okay, before I dive into this with both feet, let's make sure this is something that I really want to do, right? So all signs are pointing to go at this point, which is really exciting. So the business model based on Louisa and what she's exploring would be a business within a business. So Louisa will own her own sole proprietorship in her business that would be owning the pony as well as having an exclusive partnership with the Princess Party Company. So the Princess Party Company has said, we think based on our projections and interest, we could book 8 to 10 parties a month for at least 10 months because that takes into consideration, kind of November, December, holiday months where things aren't quite as busy. And so the other piece that Louisa is looking at is renting the pony out for photo shoots, so partnering with photographers as well. But she wouldn't partner with any other sort of princess party because the Princess Party Company has said, we want this to be an exclusive partnership. And so within her agreement with the business, there'll be certain requests, right? That there's at least 8 to 10 parties a month if she's going to be exclusive so that she can cover her expenses throughout. And so we're looking at, throughout the research process, we're looking at, okay, what would it cost to lease a pony versus own a pony? And so it's pointing to that Louisa will own a pony at this point, her boarding costs, as well as what are all of the costs associated with owning a pony and, cleaning the hooves, getting their teeth cleaned, all of the princess party regalia that she would need, as well as the pony. And so the piece that we're looking at now is how will the pony get there? So would Louisa own a vehicle in the trailer? Is she able to lease that or have an employment consultant? So her job coach, they're specifically looking for individuals who have a passion and skills in working with ponies as well as supporting Louisa, right? So she'll have a consultant who specifically is just Louisa's employment consultant so that there's a lot of consistency in helping her to manage her business. And then funding wise, she'll be utilizing, she's just getting ready to submit her request for a PASS plan, and then she'll use the Griffin-Hammis Kennedy Loan Foundation to help with those startup costs and use the PASS plan to pay back loans. So, and then there's maybe some project funds as well that are going to be available to help support her with her startup costs. So she is really waist deep as far as where she's at with her business model and moving into the launch period. So it's a really fun concept. I think it totally fits Louisa as well as her needs, right? So she wanted something that was flexible. She has a lot of support needs around her knee right now. And so this allows her to be able to schedule kind of on her own, but have shorter shifts, allow her some downtime as well. But the care for her pony is also going to take up time during her week as well. So she's got to make sure that she's paying herself for that time too. So that is Miss Louisa. Oh no, we're going to talk a little bit about research. I kind of already jumped into this, but so the cost of her stable, the horse, and the equipment, and so we got all of that information by talking to various local experts, and then discussion with the pony company in Utah, and various conversations with local experts around just animal care, people who have experience in the pony business as well as the event planning business. So. Any questions in regards to Miss Louisa before we move on to M? Excellent. Thanks, John. All right, we'll keep plugging away. And if you have questions, just plop them in the chat box and we'll keep moving along. And I'll be happy to keep you all posted on Miss Louisa if you'd like. All right, so this is Miss M. And I have to disclose that M is my sister. So this is certainly a story that I know very well. I share it not because she is my sister, but because I know all of the details really well as far as her business development and her launch. So Miss M is from a rural community here in Iowa. So our family grew up in Independence, Iowa, which is a town of about 6,000 people probably on a good day. There's stoplights, a super Walmart, there's probably like 5 gas stations and 5 pizza places. But beyond that, it's kind of your traditional rural community. There's no public transportation options available. Employment providers are few and far between. And so M, when she was in high school, was told by various systems and various times that she would not be able to work competitively in the community, that she just didn't embody the skills, and that the best option for her would be to go to a sheltered workshop. And so at that point, there was a lot of, in my family included, our expectations were set. And I think that's one thing to pay attention to was that's all we knew, right? Because that's all that was shared with us was that M would be best served in a facility-based setting, that she wouldn't do well in a community-based setting. However, M is one of the most social human beings that I know. I am naturally an introvert. She is naturally an extrovert. She is very good at her job. But the expectations were really being set prior to any thoughts of employment, right? And so just being aware of that I think you can be that light for a lot of families. You can share that things are possible. And you also might be the first person that this family has talked to that says, yes, community employment is possible. Self-employment is possible. That working outside of facility-based environments is possible. So just know that I think that's a cool responsibility that each of us take on in this industry, is instilling hope and seeing the possibilities. And I think that's the beauty of self-employment, is that it can really be a shoe that fits for anyone. And so M also has, these are pictures of M growing up and just kind of showing her natural ability around work, right? So like even as a small child, she's at the PlayStation for the post office. She's on the phone, which this girl loves to be on the phone. And the other piece is there just aren't a lot of employment opportunities in Independence. There are, but there's none that are being advertised, right? Because it's made up of small town businesses. Our family is small town business owners. Our family owns the local hardware store and owns the local coffee shop. But prior to this, in looking at, where could M contribute? Again, what was being pushed was the sheltered workshop piece, right? And so we all kind of fell into that and said, okay, like if this is what everybody thinks is best for M, we'll go with it. So I share also that with you because families can transform, right? I am all for community employment. My life is about community employment for all people, right? So, but that it's okay to make that transformation, right? And that we make decisions based on what we know and what we've experienced. So the more that we can support families and individuals to hear various success stories, the more that opens up the possibilities. So M ends up graduating from high school. She goes into a facility-based workshop, and she's there for a couple of years. Life is very predictable. She goes Monday through Friday, 8 to 3. That's when the one tiny little bit that public transportation works is like from 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock, Monday through Friday. It's not really realistic for most folks who don't work in those specific time frames, right? And so anyway, she's been participating in the workshop for a couple of years at this point, and real life happenings start happening in the workplace, right? So there's this event that took place, and M was really distracted that day, and reasonably so. But however, the result of that was that she wasn't ready for community employment, and so per the provider. And M had decided at that point that that workplace was very uncomfortable for her, and she refused to go back. So this real life happening happens in the workplace. It doesn't go well, and M decides, I'm not going back. And so at that point, our family, in support of M, really said, okay, well, what's next for M? She's in her early 20s. The idea of her not working is not okay. At this point, I'm a young developer helping folks in Des Moines find employment. And so we're having conversations about, maybe I could come home and take a couple of weeks off and do job development for my sister. But the idea of her being stagnant, the idea of her just going to day hab all day was not an option. So we started pulling people together that knew M really well. So that was my mom, myself. M, of course, is at the forefront of everything, right? So as well as a job coach that was a really strong support for her, another provider that was in the community that did residential, but they didn't necessarily do employment. And then my mom had a contact who was already, she worked in the system. She wasn't necessarily part of a provider, but worked more at the state level. But she knew who we could contact, what resources we needed to tap into to get more information. And so at this point, we're just tossing out ideas of, okay, M is certainly best in the morning. She is fantastic with people. And then all of a sudden, these self-employment considerations kind of started popping up in the conversation of, well, what if M owned her own business? What would that look like? What would that be like for her? And what would the community need, right? So I keep getting ahead of myself. So we pull the team together, and things start talking about, oh, well, maybe she could own a thrift store. And then all of a sudden, these ideas of donation businesses started coming up. And so my mom was very clear that no. If M is going to open up a business, it's going to be a first-class business, because if it's something, the idea of just donating things was the idea of, oh, well, she's second class, right? No, if she's going to own a business, she's going to sell something that the community needs, and it's going to be a first-class product. And so then we just started thinking about, okay, well, who is M, right? And all of these are happening in just general conversation. It's not a big formal meeting, right? I mean, we pulled everybody together like a pizza place, and then phone calls started happening. So I don't want you to think that it has to be this formal piece, right? It's just conversations and brainstorming and collecting information. And so we started thinking about who is M. And so at this point, let's see, she's almost had her business for 10 years. So we're talking about, this is like circa 2007, 2008. And so at this point, customized employment is not in independence whatsoever. Nobody's offering discovery, but organically we're going through the discovery process, right? And so who is M? She's a morning person. This girl has woke up at 5:30 every single day since she's been born. She's just naturally a morning person. And she's also a conversationalist. So she can have a conversation with anybody. And she has this ability to make that person feel like they're the most important person that she's talking to, right? So she is great about remembering details about people. So she's great about saying, well, how are your kids? Or how is so and so? And you can see this also by how she goes when she goes to church. She is like the natural greeter. At my wedding, she created her own receiving line because everybody's giving her hugs and she's saying thank you. She's just naturally so good with people. And everybody oftentimes loves her. There are a few people in the world that she doesn't like, but she doesn't like everybody, right? She is human. And most people just really connect with her and attract to her. So she just has this ability to really be present with people. And so all of these things we're taking into consideration. And at the same time, it was looking at what does the town of Independence need, right? They didn't need another gas station. They don't need another pizza place because there are plenty to go around. However, we started looking at where do people congregate in town? It's either if I have a business meeting and I don't want to meet at the library or my office, there's either, if I'm going to get lunch with somebody, the Chinese restaurant, like the local Subway, or one of the 5 pizza places and the Mexican restaurant. But that's about it. And so, but there was no place to just get a really great cup of coffee. So the idea started spinning from, okay, well, Independence doesn't have a coffee shop. There were 2, but they didn't succeed. And so then in the research process, we explored that, but just the idea of what could the town benefit from? And that's a key principle as we're looking into self-employment, right? The community needs to be able to benefit. You have to have a customer base. That's how you test your feasibility at the same time, right? But the intent is to make money. And so it was really looking at what does M bring to the table and what does the town of Independence need? And so that's when the idea of this coffee shop really started taking hold, was because Independence really could benefit from a coffee shop. The only other place to get a really good cup, not even a really good cup of coffee, but if you just wanted to buy a cup of coffee, you either went to one of the local gas stations or there was a small, tiny little breakfast nook that had been around for years where they have about, 15 to 20 regulars who get the same like pancakes, bacon, eggs, and coffee. But otherwise, that was it. There really wasn't a place that you could just go grab a really good cup of coffee from. And so at this point, the business concept is bubbling, right? And so we're starting to talk to other people. I was a job developer working at a provider, and I would even go up to folks that I worked with, VR counselors, other providers that I had worked closely with, and said, hey, like my sister's kind of considering this self-employment thing. Do you know of any grants? Do you know of anyone who's opened up their own business? And the funny thing is, the responses, even from people in what I would have considered my own tribe at that point, said, well, gee, well, how will that work? Or, that's interesting. So there was even a lot of just kind of, I don't see how that concept works, or that's cool, but I don't know. Even in approaching Voc Rehab, at that point, they said, well, no, this isn't a business concept that we could support because she's not going to run 100% of her business. However, no business owner operates 100% of their business. My parents own a hardware store. My mom is not in the back fixing lawnmowers. She also hires an accountant to manage her books. So my parents both rely on people to help benefit their business, as does every other single business owner. And so I tell you this because as the concept is bubbling, as you're talking to other people, there will be naysayers. There are going to be people that say, gee, I don't know how that's going to work. Or, I don't know that we can support that. And I tell you that because there might be people in our tribe that are telling us that, right? But that doesn't mean that the process halts. That means that you keep researching. It means that you keep pushing. because when somebody has a really good concept, you've got to push, right? So, um, but lots of conversations of, I don't know of any grants for that kind of thing. Um, so the naysayers are out there, and oftentimes those folks are also going to be the first people when they hit success that are automatically on the bandwagon. So we're transforming a lot of things as we pursue self-employment, right? So um, so part of M's process was really pushing rules and policy. So within vocational rehabilitation, again, they said, sorry, initially we can't support this because she won't operate 100% of her business, because she needed support with operating her cash register. She would need support with her books, payroll, etc. Right? So it happened to be that VR did come along later in the process. There was a new counselor that took office and had reviewed M's case and said, yes, now we'd like to be on board. And they did support her business with some grant funding. So I also tell you that because it might be that you hit a roadblock for 6 or 7 times, but eventually it might not be a roadblock, right? So just that constant pushing, not in a rude way, but just being persistent. And so from the Medicaid perspective, it was also looking at how does job coaching work for self-employment, right? And where you all are, a lot of these things have probably already been paved for you. However, with M, she didn't have an employment provider first. So there was no community rehab provider that one was going to provide that support because they didn't exist. And so it was looking at also, well, what does job coaching look like for someone who's self-employed? And so that really wasn't explored in depth much. And so we started having conversations with Medicaid and came to the conclusion that utilizing self-directed Medicaid funds was going to be the best option for her. So essentially, she doesn't use a provider for her job coaching. She uses a self-directed method where she has access to those Medicaid funds, or the fiscal agent does, and she hires her job coaches specifically for her. And so oftentimes they have an interest in coffee or being a barista, as well as supporting M. And she also hires folks with disabilities as well. So there are a couple of coaches that support her at the coffee shop. And so but she uses self-directed. She doesn't have a provider. And so that's the difference with Louisa's story, which I think is interesting, right? Because it has to be a possibility whether you have a provider or not. And so with Louisa, she doesn't have as much family support, but her provider is willing to say, let's find an employment specialist that will solely specifically work with Louisa and her business. So she's devoted to Louisa and also has skills in that area. With M, similar, that she has specific job coaches that only work with her, but she's using the self-directed method as opposed to working with a provider. So, but M also has quite a bit of family support. Our mom is very involved in the business as well and supporting M. So it's just different tools for different folks, right? And then another big piece is have an insider to help guide and connect you. And so for M's story, this was our work incentive planning and assistance project benefits planner, right? So your WIPA, your local benefits planning staff. And so this was someone that M and my mom really connected to. But the beauty of it was that she knew all these various people that really were going to benefit M's situation. So example, she knew folks within Voc Rehab that would help further the conversation. She also helped know the folks in Medicaid that could really provide specific direction as opposed to saying, I don't know what that looks like. We don't do that sort of thing. However, by having that insider, it really helped guide and connect us as far as how will this process work for M. So now we're moving on to the research phase, right? And there's no specific time frame that all of this happens. It kind of automatically starts overlapping each other, right? And so within the research phase, we're looking at testing feasibility. And so M didn't necessarily test out her business concept in the way that Louisa did. She didn't go around selling coffee yet because that wasn't set up. She didn't have the equipment to do so. However, she started talking to previous coffee shop owners. So that's really where the research began for her, because there were two coffee shops that had existed in Independence. And so by small town connection, right, the beauty of working in a small rural area is everybody knows everybody. So it wasn't hard to get in touch with those folks. And so the first coffee shop that was in operation was very successful. And the woman did it as kind of a fun venture. So it wasn't necessarily for a profit. It was great that she was making a profit, and she did turn a profit, but it wasn't something that was life sustaining for her. So she had a couple of good years and then decided this just isn't for me anymore. And so from there, the second coffee shop really came in and took over this previous coffee shop, but tried to make it something that it wasn't, right? So it was previously very well known for certain things, and then they came in and wanted to do kind of the same business model, but it was very different. So it wasn't successful because it wasn't the same coffee shop that it was before, but it tried to be, if that makes sense. And so from that information, one, we knew that the coffee shop was successful, right? If it had its own concept. And so the second coffee shop had fit into that same location. It still was in that same location. And so the difference about M's is that it ends up being in a different location. And she's very known for just being M's as opposed to trying to fit the sock that somebody else wore, if that makes sense, right? So we're talking to previous coffee shop owners. Through that, they say, if you do pursue this route, I still have the espresso machine. I still have the grinder, and I'd be willing to, give this to Em if this is something that she wants to pursue. So great, we're building that social capital. She's already has some interest, and we're also spreading through the grapevine that there might be a coffee shop that's coming to Independence at the same time, right? Because news travels very quickly. And so at the same time, we're visiting coffee shops all over Northeast Iowa in anywhere of a 20, 40, 60-mile radius. So we've all, I think, gained 5 to 10 pounds by eating various baked goods, drinking various lattes, skim milk, whole milk, trying to figure out also what does the interior, what it might look like, what kind of environment does Em want to have, right? And so we're doing all of this research, and many of the coffee shops are very willing to talk to us, just in exploring, hey, we're from this small community. We're accessing coffee shops outside of our community, but are in communities that are similar to Independence, if that makes sense. And then at the same time, talking to various local businesses to gauge interest. If there was a coffee shop, would this benefit your customers? Would you access this business? And so at the time, Em had a local scholarship that she provided to high school students. And as the business concept was formulated, and we knew that Em was going to open up her business, during her speech and giving or her bio and giving away her scholarship, it was announced that Em was going to be the owner of Em's Coffee Company in Independence, which helped spread the word widely, right? So anybody who had a senior or was part of the high school knew at that announcement, there's a coffee shop coming to town. So in this small community, news travels quickly. And so the self-advertising piece really started happening just by word of mouth. And so another business speed bump was finding a building for Em. So again, very different from Louisa's concept, because Louisa doesn't have to have a building. She has a place to put her horse, but the coffee shop needs to operate out of a brick and mortar building. And so finding a building was really difficult. Actually, the opportunity came up where she might have access to this previous coffee shop where the other two coffee shops in town had existed. And so at that point, excuse me, there was the opportunity, and Em was in the bidding process. However, she didn't end up getting the building, and that felt like a huge setback because it was already set up to be a coffee shop. However, I think it really benefited her by not being in that space, because She's now in a space that is her own. It's never been a coffee shop before. It was an insurance building prior. We'll walk through a little bit of the pre and post construction pictures. And so the other piece about the building is it's actually owned by my parents, and M rents from my parents. So in an effort to try and keep her expenses low. And so if you think of like a small town Main Street, this kind of cartoon depicts a small town Main Street, but buildings are oftentimes very tall, tall meaning second to 3 stories, not 33 stories, but they're tall and they're skinny, but there's a lot of room on the way back, right? So they're long and skinny businesses or buildings. And so M's occupies the front half of a building, and then there are 2 office spaces behind M's, because again, remember, long and skinny, she didn't need the whole building. However, by having 2 different office spaces behind her coffee shop, that keeps the rent low, right? So it's a creative approach to really helping her make the numbers work, because independents probably can't fill an entire building coffee shop. However, again, to keep her rent low, there's those 2 office spaces. And so now those are occupied by a nail tech, so you can go and get your nails done. How perfect is it that you can grab your espresso drink, go back, get your nails done? It's fantastic, right? They support each other's businesses. And then her second space is actually vacant right now, but it used to be a massage therapist. And so this past winter, the past couple of winters, during the holidays, they would package up a gift card to, get a masseuse or get a massage, get your coffee, and get your nails done, right? So I don't know. I think that sounds like a fantastic gift. But the businesses also support one another, but at the same time, these businesses help keep M's rent at a reasonable cost. So just different approaches in making it work, right? So the concept is being creative. What are ways that the community can benefit, but at the same time to keep her costs low? So, and everybody in the community benefits also from the nail tech, the masseuse, and a great coffee shop. So where did M go for marketing and training? So while all of this research is taking place, at the same time, she's got to learn how to become a barista. Because if you ask M, do you drink coffee? She says, no, but my sister does. She has no love for coffee, not a bit. So the idea, the concept, remember, of the coffee shop was not born out of M's love of coffee. It was born out of the idea of what the community needed and what M could benefit, or what benefit she can provide the community, right? So we know that she's a people person. We know that she's at her best in the morning. We know that she has the ability to memorize specific details about people. Who doesn't love to come into a coffee shop and hear, hey, good morning, Ashley. How's your family? What's going on? And that's M at her best, right? And so she needed to learn how to be a barista. And so we looked at, in the region, where do people go to learn how to serve coffee? So there's a barista school in Minnesota. So she was able to use her startup funds and grant funds to be able to attend barista school in Minnesota. And she had taken her job coach with her at that point. So the cool piece was that she was also, during her business development stage, was able to use job coaching dollars to support her and to pay her staff to be able to support her in the business development piece. So they attended barista school in Minnesota. The really cool piece about that is the accommodations for her coffee shop, which I'll show you here in a little bit, were developed out of the folks at the barista school, who have absolutely no training in disability supports or accommodations or assistive technology whatsoever. But I think it's cool to note just how creative they naturally are, and that all of her accommodations are actually quite minimal in cost, which again, you'll see here in a few minutes. Another piece that M built into her business concept was that she was going to offer ice cream. And so the only other ice cream place in town was Dairy Queen. So they did soft serve ice cream, but nobody did like scooping, like hard served ice cream, right? And so that was another thing within her business concept, that this is something that the community doesn't have. So there's actually the ice cream company that she gets her ice cream from does an ice cream scooping school. And so that's where you learn about their ice cream, you learn how to scoop their ice cream. And so she attended that training in Wisconsin. And again, she's using funding, her startup funding, as well as some of the funding from Voc Rehab also supported her in attending these trainings. And then additionally, she was able to use some of the VR funds to be able to work with a marketing company that developed and designed her logo. And then throughout that piece, our parents, again, owned the local hardware store. And my mom's an expert in paint. And so she started researching what paint colors do to our natural stimulus, right? So the paint color yellow actually makes us hungry. The color of brown is very inviting. And so you'll see in pictures that I'll show you throughout EMS that those colors were used. And we researched the colors of the walls to really create an inviting environment, right? So anything really can be researched in business development. And then again, we announced her opening up the business at the scholarship assembly. And then she started telling everyone, right? So she'd be in the grocery store and she'd say, hey, do you know I'm opening up a coffee shop? You should come see me at my coffee shop. So she just naturally, because she was well respected and well known in the community, she could really start promoting that small town gossip quite quickly. The other piece I want to point out is that it absolutely takes a team. So here's kind of who was part of M's team. So M is always at the center of it, right? So she's the boss and she loves being the boss. But our parents, family, and friends were absolutely part of the process, right? So as I'll show you here in a few minutes, the construction piece was done by our dad and our grandfather, who were very skilled in construction and DIY. But family and friends were absolutely part of the process and continue to be a support for M. Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation, her case is now successfully closed. However, they were really a key player early on, right? Not prior to when she was being denied services. However, once they became a partner, she was able to use some grant funds from Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation, and they did support the development of her business. Also utilizing Medicaid home and community-based waiver services. Again, specifically, M uses a self-directed model, so she isn't working specifically with a CRP. She's hiring her own job coaches, and then through the fiscal agent, they're paid. And then the networking in the community, right? Without the networking, she wouldn't have had access to the espresso machine, the grinder, the materials that were just naturally given to her because people wanted to support her in the development of a coffee shop. Another absolute key player, particularly if anybody who is receiving SSI or a Title II benefit, is making sure that you're pulling in the work incentive planning and assistance project or benefits planners, certified benefits planners that are working with folks that are pursuing self-employment. Because one, the ability to use a PASS plan, right? So plan for achieving self-support, which is a way to save money for a work goal. M didn't utilize a PASS plan, but for many folks, for example, like Louisa's story, Louisa is going to use a PASS plan to help with startup costs for her business. So a big piece is making sure that WIPA project person is involved in helping with the benefits planning. And then M also used the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. There was a grant that had nothing to do with disability, and it was identified through social capital. So that's another reason to just really being a piece of being part of the fabric of your community, right? So that you can connect with other people and just know about what's taking place in my community. The conversation came about through a conversation my mom had with a city planner who said, oh, well, the Department of Natural Resources has this grant that if you were to provide local products, so M serves local honey, she uses local fruit and smoothies, she was able to use this grant through the Department of Natural Resources. So the grant doesn't always have to be A, disability specific, or two, self-employment specific. It could be like the Iowa Department of Natural Resources just by selling products. And so that also was built into her startup costs and helped her to not also need a PASS plan, as well as she does receive SSI, but at the time that she was in business development, she didn't have anything to put into a PASS because she wasn't working. She didn't have a Title II benefit. So that's just another reason that PASS didn't work out for her. So this is Miss M. This is on the left is a picture of her coffee shop logo. On the right is a picture of M with a decal behind her that says M's Coffee Company. And you can tell she's kind of got like this retro feel in her business. And that was something that she really liked as we were touring other coffee shops. And the cool thing was that these tables and chairs are like straight out of the 70s. And literally they are straight out of the 70s because many of them were donated. So through, again, that small town gossip, we started putting out the need of, do you have any of those, tables and chairs from the 70s that have that look? I don't describe them well, and then she recovered all of those chairs, cleaned up the tables, and it was amazing just how many people wanted to support and donate, and they just gave the tables. She was willing to pay, but it was a cool piece. And so as her business is getting up and getting ready to get started, she's recovering the chairs, she's helping paint the walls, and again, she's able to use job coaching funds. Even though her business hasn't started yet, she was able to use those funds to be able to pay her job coach to support her in the development phase. And again, you see that her walls are yellow, right? Makes you hungry. This is the outside of M's, right? So you can kind of see that it's on a small town main street area. And it's her building is painted brown. She has these big vibrant window canopies, and then her business logo as well. So it's just a cute, inviting little coffee shop. This is the before and after. So I show you this because anything is possible. M's, the place where M's is at. Prior to that, it used to be an insurance company, and behind the insurance company was a gymnastics studio. And so you are looking at the picture of the gymnastics studio with all of the carpet ripped up. And then the after is here's M's. So it looks very different. Again, all of the construction work was done by our grandfather as well as our dad, and as well as, some community members were brought in to like lay the floor. But for the most part, it was all done by our family. So it took the time frame. M quit the workshop in February, and she opened up, so February in 2007, so at the beginning of the year, and by December 31st, she was opening up her business, right? So almost the time frame of a year is kind of the before and after. Oops. Sorry, folks. All right. So this is M at work. So when you walk in, you have your menu, and M's standing at the cash register. And the really cool piece is that, so she's now been in operation for almost 10 years. But when she first started, one of the things, even as a family member, we said, well, M has just never, none of us in our family are real good mathematicians. But we thought, the cash register is probably something that, she'll always need a level of support with. And one of the cool accommodations that was made was that all of the tax is already included in all of the cost. So when you go into the coffee shop and you want to order a latte, it's $4 or $4.50 for, based on regular or large. So there's only 2 drink sizes, but all of the tax is already included, so that everything ends on the quarter or the dollar. So it makes math a whole lot easier. And so throughout the years, M has always been, she always loves operating the cash register, but it was always something that she needed a significant amount of support with. However, let's see, in 2014, She had the busiest day of operation in her life. There's this really big bike ride that goes through the state of Iowa called RAGBRAI. And thousands, I mean thousands of people, I think it's anywhere from like 10, 15, 20,000 people, bike riders, ride across the state of Iowa, and they ride through all of these small towns. And so she is inundated with business because there are thousands of bike riders coming through town. And so the cool thing is that M operated the cash register all day long. She did have some minimal supports, but on the busiest day of the year, you know, she's up there owning and rocking her business and rocking the cash register. So I also tell you that because, excuse me, I hear a lot of times people will say, oh, well, this person can't manage money or they can't do this. It doesn't mean that they can't, right? So with M, it's not that she knows the amount of money. So if you ask her how much something, she knows the cost of everything in her coffee shop. But in general, if she buys a new shirt or something, she'll say, oh, it's $5 a buck. So everything is $5. So she doesn't necessarily know the weight of money. However, she memorizes the equations, right? Many people will give her a 5 or a 10, and she knows if a latte is $4.50, I'm going to give somebody a 5 and 2/4 back. So it's amazing, just all of her accomplishments, right? And I point that out because I think sometimes it's easy for us to get into an assessment mode, and that's really not something we need to assess somebody on, right? So it is something that can be developed and supported if the individual has an interest and a passion in it. So, and then this is the prior to the business being a insurance company and a gymnastics studio, it was the local newspaper. And so as we're cleaning out the business, M finds all of these local old newspaper metal prints, right? How they used to print the paper. And so in the back area is this meeting space called the newsroom, which, you know, pays tribute to the building in its past, that it used to be a newspaper. And so she has all of these old clippings and metal pieces of the past newspaper in that space. And then it also, for the community, remember, there's no just general place to hold a meeting or an event unless it's at a restaurant. And so the coffee shop, this is a reservable space. So that also helps bring in large groups. And then, you know, she has the policy that you have to, you can't bring in your own food, right? So that also helps support her business. So these are just more pictures of M's. One of the cool things is she has these really trendy coffee shop t-shirts. And so the one she's wearing says, keep calm and drink coffee. But every 6 months or so, she does a new batch of t-shirts. And so the community has really kind of taken a hold and really enjoyed her different sayings on coffee shop t-shirts. She'll go around to conferences as well and sell t-shirts and coffee, which is another way for her to bring in revenue as well. So we're going to walk through some of her accommodations to her business because they're so small, but they make the biggest difference. So this is her espresso machine. Any of you who are into coffee, you know this is the espresso machine. And so up here, where the arrows are pointing, it tells you when you're making the espresso how many shots of espresso are going to go in each cup. So if you order a small or a regular, you get 1 shot. If you're ordering a large, you get 2 shots of espresso. And so Em was really struggling with this at her barista schooling. And so they did 1 dot of orange puff paint for 1 shot or 2 dots for 2 shots. So something as simple as a $2 bottle of orange puff paint can be used as an accommodation. So this is just a blown up picture of those 2 dots. And then the other piece is you have to lock in the espresso head when you're making espresso. And so it was difficult to lock it in. So they put 2 little markers here with the orange paint to know where you lock it in and match up those orange dots to lock it in. So again, very, very simple accommodations, but they make the world a difference. This is her on the left. You're looking at the grinder. So you have to grind the espresso machine or grind the espresso beans before you put them in the espresso machine. And so here, the decaf beans look identical to the caffeinated beans. The star indicates that this side is decaf. So you want to stay away from the star for most folks, because most folks are offering caffeinated or hoping to get or ordering a caffeinated beverage, right? So these little cards on the side. So Em was studying this visually prior to opening up her coffee shop. And so the interesting thing is that really the main difference in drinks is the amount of steamed milk and foam, but the amount of espresso is oftentimes the same. It's the flavorings, but really what makes the difference is the amount of steamed milk that's in a drink. And so Em would use these cards to help guide her in what makes up a latte, a mocha, a cappuccino, etc. And so the really cool thing is that all of these accommodations benefit every single employee of the coffee shop. My husband and I actually used to work Saturdays for her because she had a hard time finding Saturday staff. So we would help her years ago on Saturdays. And I can say honestly that we used these accommodations just as much as anybody else did. So they benefit everybody in the coffee shop. Also offers smoothies. So again, orange puff paint is used to identify you can only get a smoothie in one size, but if you fill the contents up to this orange dot, that fills the cup, right? So I need the contents of the smoothie machine to at least fill where that orange dot is. Otherwise, I'm not going to fill the cup and the customer is not going to be happy. Her cash register. So initially, she just had a very basic cash register and they visually drew out little pieces. So Em's very pictorial. And so a couple of years ago, she upgraded to the iPad system and using Square as part of her cash register, the Square company. And so Em went around and said, okay, when I think of brewed coffee, this is what I think of. And she took pictures of all of those things that indicated what that item meant to her. So if somebody orders bulk coffee, they took a picture of the bag that bulk coffee comes in. So everything is based on pictures. So through Em's business development, the cool thing is she's built some really cool social capital along the way. So this is Senator Tom Harkin from Iowa. He's now retired, but he really grabbed a hold of Em's story and they've been friends for quite a few years now. And so he invited her to the signing of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act in 2014. And so in that, we were part of the audience, and Em was privately asked to go back and meet with Senator Harkin and President Obama at the time. So here's a picture of Em with an Em's Coffee Company t-shirt with Senator Harkin and again, past President Obama in the White House. But privately, my mom and I were not invited back. And I think that's such a beautiful moment because Em has shared her life with a lot of people, including us as family and including her support staff. And this was a moment that was all her. And, you know, we all still kind of grill her about it, wanting to know all of the details. And she just says, he's a nice guy. But, you know, it's a moment that was all hers and very cool that, you know, due to her success, she was invited. So, and then Em just is great at marketing folks. So during the election a few years ago now, Iowa is first in the caucus. So a lot of candidates will come to Iowa first. And Hillary Clinton was making her rounds in Northeast Iowa. And so she made an off-route stop due to Em's social capital that she has developed with Senator Harkin, because Senator Tom Harkin is friends with the Clintons, and said, hey, Hillary, if you are ever in Northeast Iowa and near Independence, you should stop and see my friend Em. And so Hillary Clinton makes this off-route stop just randomly. Nobody knew she was coming. And makes this stop at Em's Coffee Company, and our cousin is a photographer at a local paper, the largest local paper here in Iowa, and she was unaware of this stop, right? And so she wasn't there yet, and Em halts basically all of the, you know, there's all of the cameras from all of the national news studios, and Em says, wait, where's Kelsey? And Hillary says, well, who's Kelsey? And Em shares that it's our cousin, and she specifically waits so that Kelsey has the opportunity to come and get photos and have an interview with Hillary. So M is just good for everybody's career. She has the capacity and the ability to connect with people that really benefits various folks, right? So it's just kind of a cool story, I think, because it really, I think, shows the power of social capital in relationships, no matter where we're at in the business process. So this is, okay, so we're gonna flip to a quick video of M so you can see her in action. And bear with me, as I oftentimes bring technical difficulties whenever I'm doing a webinar. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to push play and hopefully it works.
So I open the door at 6:30 every morning, and school comes at 3. I have to leave at 2:15. I got six employees. I do the cash register like every week. I use it with my espresso milk with the cup. I use thermometer and it hits to the top, and I shut off. I have turkey, bacon, lamb, hot cheese, a bourbon, grilled salad, got chili. Shy, short, add, go. There we go. Lower down. And anything else. Lower down. It will be $5. Five. Now change.
Okay, so that is Miss M. And I think we are back to Jess. If you could help me pull up the PowerPoint. Fabulous. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So that was Miss M. I do have to say that she doesn't love everybody, but at least her customers think she does, which is great. But she is human. So um, that is M in action. So what are some takeaways? So you've heard about Louisa, you've heard about M, and a little bit more in detail about M. But what are some things that I think, what are some principles across both stories, right? So I think it's really important that we're going back to the very basis of what gets us started in DPG is getting to know someone in their environment, right? So M was labeled a lot. Louisa has also experienced labels, right? But getting to know them in their environment makes all the difference. With Louisa, we didn't know that she was this natural party planner, this natural hostess until we went to her house. And that wasn't even something when we had talked to her teachers that came out. But as soon as we were in her space, that was just so prevalent. And with them, obviously I know her a little bit differently as my sister. However, getting to know her in her own space makes all the difference as opposed to getting to know her in the workshop and at school because she's a natural people person. However, that could be labeled as being very distracted in a school-based environment because she would, often love to talk to everybody who's around her. Um, and, but she's naturally a morning person, but really getting to know people in their space, that home visit and spending time with someone in their environment is just so critical to what we do. And to really be self-aware about our predetermined ideas, right? So even from the naysayers and the folks that have come in, and Louisa has also experienced naysayers and has struggled with her own systems that are not in support of her business development. However, all the feasibility information is pointing to go, that she can make it, that this could be a really successful business venture for her. But really being self-aware, right? That oftentimes we can come into a scenario with predetermined ideas. And what we have predetermined, what we have set in our mind, also what we've experienced is oftentimes what we develop to. And so if we can put that aside and really allow the process to guide us as opposed to what we know, that's really helpful, right? So in the beginning of our time together today, I shared the concept of creating and not cloning, right? And I think the idea of cloning, the idea of Em has presented her story across the country, and a lot of people walk away saying, well, how can I open up a coffee shop for my child? That's not the message, right? So it's predetermined. And so we want to put those predetermined ideas aside. And the only way we can do that is really taking a look at ourselves and saying, what are my predetermined ideas, right? So being self-aware to know that about ourselves and to really work beyond what we know. And again, we develop to what we know and we develop to what we've experienced. And when we do that, we miss the unknown, right? Where the cool stuff happens. And we get there by having conversations with other people, by getting into our communities and digging, right? So as part of that discovery process and informational interviews and connecting with experts, that information presents itself, right? And so we just have to remember, I like to say, think of yourself as a squirrel and you're just collecting nuts at this point, right? Like you're just collecting information and trusting the process that this is, when you identify that need, okay, well, maybe let's explore this concept, right? When we met Louisa, we had no idea that it was going to take her on a path of self-employment and potentially owning her own pony business that's going to have this exclusive partnership with the Princess Company, right? So really trusting the process and putting our own ideas, predetermined ideas aside and just allowing it to take us where it needs to. And of course, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but that individualized services really make a difference. With both Em and Louisa, we didn't get there by group concepts. It's all about who each of these women are individually. And so providing services one person at a time, that doesn't mean you have a caseload of one. However, it does mean you have a smaller caseload, right? 5, 7 individuals, but that having an individualized service where I'm just focused on Louisa, I'm just focused on M, makes all the difference. And that customization really works, and that self-employment can work for anybody, right? M was labeled by various systems, various times, that she could not contribute to the community, that she would not work competitively. However, she works 40 hours a week, she owns her own business, and she has reduced her reliance on SSI. She's a tax-paying citizen. She hires other people with disabilities. So the idea that, defining her by all of her deficits really doesn't work, right? But she has so much to offer the community. And the piece of really pulling in and engaging family and friends, right? So with M, her family is really part of her support team in her business model. For Louisa, she has some family support. It's not as intense. They don't have as much capacity, I guess, to support her, which is totally fine, right? They're supporting her in her own way, but her provider is also able to offer her more opportunities than M's was. So again, it looks different for everybody. There's no cookie cutter process when we're looking at self-employment or individualized services. It's just looking at what concepts are important and how can we apply them, right? And so again, the answer isn't a coffee shop for everyone. It's not a pony business for everyone. It's really looking at what makes sense for this person. What skills and abilities do they contribute, and personal genius do they contribute, and what can the community benefit from? If M does love pizza, but Independence didn't need another pizza place, right? Like there was no feasibility for that. No one was going to support another pizza place in Independence. However, when it comes to a coffee shop, they do, right? Because it was a need for the community. And to abide by the philosophy of anything is possible, right? I think sometimes, again, we develop to what we know, and our own fear can get in the way of pursuing some really cool opportunities for folks by just having conversations, by just saying, well, what if this is possible? So I challenge all of you to go into supporting folks with the philosophy of anything is possible. Yes, there are going to be barriers. Yes, there are going to be situations that make you want to rip your hair out. However, the solution is there. It's just not presenting itself yet, right? So, but when you have the social capital, when you connect with experts, just know that anything is possible, and that and to trust the process, and to use your resources as well, right? So, and the basis that customized employment guides us, right? That the job seeker drives the process. Everywhere we go is based on what we've learned about who this person is. They are always in the driver's seat. And that this really does require relationship building and listening on all fronts in both of the stories, in connecting with the community and connecting with families and connecting with the job candidates themselves, and even our partners, our state partners, right? That those relationships are key throughout the process, and that we really have to listen. It's not about us. It's not about the services that we provide. It's really about listening about who is this person, their expertise, and how could they be part of the process? What can they bring to the table, right? And that we're also looking at small artisan businesses and really looking at, again, what benefits the community, and always taking into consideration what the job candidate brings to the table. And we're matching their skills and abilities for the whole win-win, right? So again, everybody's story is going to look very different. And so I wrap us up with this great quote from Albert Einstein, that everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid. And this always stands out to me, and it's always stuck with me ever since I've heard it, because I think oftentimes we judge people by the ability, we judge a fish just like, but we judge folks, right? And we put these labels on folks, and but that everybody has capacity, everybody has contribution, and everybody can work. That It's oftentimes just helping us as the support team, right? And none of you are alone in supporting that one person that you're working with. We all work together as a team to get to the outcome, right? But again, everybody is a genius. Everyone has personal genius and contribution to bring to the table. And for those that are meant to be in self-employment, it's a fantastic opportunity and life-changing venture that has benefited a lot of folks. So that concludes us. I know we're about 25 minutes short, so that gives us plenty of time for conversation and questions. But it has certainly been a pleasure to spend this Thursday afternoon with you. And I'm grateful for the invite to present and share Louisa and M's story with you. So, any thoughts? Great. Thank you, John. Thanks for being here today. And hopefully there's one or two concepts that each of you can apply to your work that you could take away today. Looks like Laura's typing something, so we'll wait a few minutes. Awesome. Yes, thanks, Laura. Absolutely. All right. I'm not seeing anybody